Peace, peace. Peace and blessings all. Let me turn down this other one real quick. Gotta change this. I had to change up the setup a little bit. Okay. All right, so let's begin. Peace and blessings. I'm Ogos OG. This is the Alchemy of Self. Last time we spoke, we were talking about the language of life and really about how we perceive ourselves through our language and how we can both create programming that can be destructive and negative towards our psyche and towards our process and our progression in this life, and as well as we can create languages that is conducive with growth and giving us more out of life. So yeah, the first teaching was really about just kind of recognizing within yourself the language that you identify your reality with and how you identify reality with language. Also understanding some of the constructs that get created through traumatic experiences, the programming, the habits, the perceptions that get formed, and then also how we can start to undo some of these things simply by identifying the language that we use. Now, today I wanted to kind of go into different, because again, we're talking about the alchemy of self, and the alchemy of self, when we're delving into the alchemy of self, you're talking about mind, body, and spirit. So the language of life really was pertaining towards more of how we operate within our mind and within our thinking. This one is the theory of the 16%, which is more of an understanding from a physiological and metaphysical standpoint of the physical being and how it pertains to the alchemy of self. So, and why is it the 16%? So I guess that's probably the best place for us to begin, is to understand what is the theory of the 16%. So the theory of the 16% is very simple. Our body consists of many different things. Trillions upon trillions of cells, hundreds of trillions of cells, atoms, muscles, tissues, tendons, bones, organs. And of all of those organs, the largest organ on the human body is the flesh. And the reason why this is important to understand is because it is also the end result of all cell growth that happens within the human body. That this form right here is the end result, what you end up seeing after all of the cells have processed and gone through the body. So it's also like the shedding off of dead cells too. That's why if you've ever noticed like dust in your house and stuff, and it's like, those aren't dust bunnies, those are you bunnies everywhere, because that's your dead cells. And it's also a part of matter and nature and everything else in creation. And so having that understanding and being able to see that and know that, you can start to develop a different awareness of what it means to be human and to be in this flesh. And but the other part of that too is that the 16% that we're talking about, that 16% is the physical body weight of the human flesh, the skin, the largest organ on the body. The largest organ on the body only consists of 16% of the actual physical body weight. And the reason why this is, again, important, something to consider, is because of that 16%, we put 99% emphasis on it, or if not 100. Most of what we consider in this life, most of what we perceive of this life is based within the knowledge of how we view this physical form, the flesh. how we choose the people that we love, sometimes how we perceive attraction, physical intimacy, and a host of other things that come along with this, and as well as a lot of misconceptions, are based within this concept theory of the 16%, because so much emphasis is placed on this physical form. And yet the greatest aspects of our whole physical form are things that are unseen. They're the things that we don't even take into account on a regular basis, like the fact that, again, hundreds of trillions of cells make up our physical body, and that each one of those individual cells plays a part in the creation of this physical form. And in many respects, that means that all of us are physical universes, living within another physical universe, in another physical body or celestial body, being this physical earth, this world, Gaia. And so understanding and being able to see ourselves as what we truly are is really important, because if not, then it's very easy to mislead or to create a misperception in other people that their emphasis should be placed on the physical form, and that it shouldn't be placed on what is actually underneath this. And why is that, something? Well, why should we care, right? A lot of people think that, like, we come into this world, you die, and that's it, and that after this it all goes black, and nothing could be further from the truth in reality, and nothing could be further from the truth in regards to all of creation, because energy is consistent in everything, and it's everlasting, and it can't be destroyed. It can only be channeled, and different forms of energy, right? And so in many ways, even in retrospect of what our physical form is, it's a conduit that's transferring energy. And when you think about how much energy that really is too, like they even say that, like, there's enough energy within the human brain to power an LED light bulb. Just based off of the neurons that fire off inside of the human brain. So again, we see within just this one part of this whole physical manifestation, we see life, we see the abundance of life, we see creation, we see matter forms, we see things that are working in conjunction towards creating life and pushing out life and giving off energy. So it is really important that we understand this physical form, because if not, it could become very easy for us to get lost in what we're told to believe about this physical form and the emphasis that gets put on it. Which, like me and my daughter were having a talk about this not that long ago, because obviously she's becoming more and more of a young, beautiful queen. And understanding that, and understanding the culture that she's growing up in, and understanding the influences and the sphere of influences that exists, especially with social media and everything else that's out there, it's very important that me and her have conversations that put into context what it means to project our beauty out into the world, and what it means, when we dress a certain way, or when we present ourselves a certain way, and what signals we're sending, and other things of that nature. And while at the same time keeping in the context of understanding that, like, there's nothing wrong with you being beautiful. There's nothing wrong with anybody being beautiful. There's nothing wrong with this physical form. We were just taught wrong, and one of the things that I probably have done the most work on within my life was undoing a lot of the misnomers and misconcepts that I had about the physical form in the first place, because of my upbringing, because of some of the experiences that I had programmed into me at a very young age a lot of misconceptions about the physical form, and especially about not only mine, but the opposite sex, about the female physical form. And I remember a lot about, growing up and watching certain movies, or seeing certain advertisements, or seeing other things. And I remember feeling triggered in ways at a very young age too, and not being able to really fully understand what it was that I was feeling, and not understanding what it was that I was experiencing. And a lot of that is because the way that physical intimacy and attraction in the female form and everything else was presented to me was in a very destructive form and a nature, especially because I was a child of abuse. So that immediately created a programming within me that changed how I viewed the physical form altogether. And that's important because in order for me to be able to recognize and understand what it means to truly inhabit this form and see it for what it truly is, I had to undo and unpack a lot of the things that I had once believed or had created beliefs through my experiences. And I had to start to see these things as what they were, which was that they were truths for which allowed me to see myself and view myself for how I truly am and how others are too. Which means, like, if I am a physical universe, if from every single atom that exists within me to the 27,000 breaths or so many breaths I take, to the thousands of thoughts that I think within the course of a day, to and a lot of these things all subconscious, then it has to be said that there is much more to not just me, but to others as well. And so that's why it's so important that we understand and we start to perceive ourselves in the nature for which we truly are, which is infinite beings, which is infinite energy, which is we are consistent with all things in creation, and there is no separation. And one of the ways that you can really start to see this and to understand this is to be able to view it from a physiological sense and understanding your physical body and knowing your physical body in terms in correlation to creation. And that is that matter exists within all things and everything. And that even the very matter and atoms that exist within our physical body were present. Mind you, this is science. Were present at the Big Bang. The very matter that exists within us right now was present during the Big Bang. And I was telling somebody this the other day when we were walking, and I said, trip on this, right? We're walking by the beach and we see this water, and I'm like, this water is like thousands of years old. Like, do you ever consider the idea that when you go to the ocean, that it's thousands of years old? But yet it's still connected to a larger body. And in that larger body, which is that earth, this beautiful celestial object that we inhabit, that's perfectly created for us to inhabit. We live inside of this sphere that's sitting inside of dark, this whole dark matter, antimatter, whatever anyone wants to call it, but it's sitting inside of a blanket of energy and matter and creation that's connected to every single thing. There's something beautiful to be said when we start to see that there is no separation. I remember describing this to my daughter, and I said, when you look up at the stars, don't look at them as if they're distant and far. Look at them as if they're a part of you. When we start to break down the walls of the things that have been taught to us to be perceived as separate, we start to see ourselves in the light of what we truly are, which is infinite. And that's why, when we, especially within the time we are right now, and going back to also with my daughter too, a couple weeks ago when the young man was killed, the 13-year-old boy was killed by the police, my daughter really struggled a lot with this one. And I think she struggles, as being an empath and other things, but she battled with it a lot. And, we were talking about it. And, one of the things that we've contended with a lot over this last year, especially with this upheaval of racial intolerance and tension that's been going on. And anyone who knows me already knows, and anyone who can look at me already knows, I'm no stranger to racism. I'm no stranger to the idea of people only perceiving me as my physical form and only seeing me as my physical form. And in fact, back when me and her mom were together, and we, I had some experiences with police and stuff where, I was being racially profiled and things. And I remember her saying that, she hadn't really truly experienced what racism was until she had been with me, because it became so much more real. And that's a hard thing, because as a person who has, over the last several years especially, set out to see myself and others beyond this physical form, I also felt like during the process of doing so, I was also coming into an age where we were being bombarded with so much more of having to view people in their physical form as being like as a race. And I'm not saying all this is bad, because I believe that with the age of enlightenment and understanding, we start to begin to see ourselves as we truly are. And that forces the conversation, and it forces the changing of the narrative, and it forces people to view other people as they truly are. And I believe that it brings us to a place of where Martin Luther King talked about, where he said that, there would come a day where we would not judge a person based on the color of the skin, but based on the content of their character. And what I really believe was what he saw, the vision and the dream he had, was that of being able to see a time where we would see our souls, we would see the essence of one. But again, in order to do that, you have to start to break down some of the misprogramming, some of the misnomers and mislabeling of this physical form, because the importance isn't all here. And in order to understand the alchemy of self, you have to understand that this is not all of me. This is not all of you. This is, and what you see is 16% of just the physical being, right? But I'm not just physical being. So you're only really seeing, an essence of me, a piece of me, a percentage of me. And even in that percentage of me, what you're seeing is that 16%, going back to, again, what is skin? Skin is the largest organ on the human body. Well, why is that important to know? Well, it's important to know because the skin is the cells, as they move and pass through the body, it's the last part of the cell growth in the human body. And so in essence, when you are looking at a person, and I teach my clients this all the time, is when you even are looking at me, you're not even seeing me today. You're seeing me as I was. You're seeing, what I invested into myself. You're seeing the work I put in, but you're basically seeing what what actions I took and steps I took. And who knows, it could have been 2 weeks ago, it could have been months ago, but it included what I put in my body for my diet. It included the time in prayer and supplication and meditation. It included time in nature. It included the time every day I'm at the gym and I'm training and I'm working on my physical temple. All of these things play a part in the alchemy of self. They're what help us to build ourselves. So even when we start to talk about the physical temple and addressing how do we appropriate the lessons of the alchemy of self and apply it to the actual physical temple, right? Because again, last time we talked about the language of life, that goes into the mind. The language of life is all about reprogramming the mind around the language that actually supplies life, not only to you, but to others as well. And it changes the programming in the context of your reality so that you can adjust. You're not waiting for life to adjust, you can adjust. Well, in the same, right? We're doing the same thing now with the body. And the theory of the 16%, and being able to see ourselves as what we truly are, which is living universes inhabited inside a physical form. And again, whether you're addressing it from a scientific perspective or you're addressing it from a religious perspective, either way, you're coming to the same conclusion, which is that we are more than what we're taught, and we were told we are. And it's not up to society to undo all of the wrongs and all of the lies and the misnomers and the misprogramming. It's not up to society to change the perspective of an individual to see themselves as what they truly are. And it's not up to society to rip back the veil and to show you that you had been living a lie the whole time. It's up to you, right? So even like when I'm talking to my daughter and we're addressing the whole concept of how she should dress as a queen, as a woman, and it's like, it isn't for me to tell her how she should or should not dress. It's for me to remind her of her true essence so that she can see beyond even having to send a signal or believe that this is the only way that I tell you who I am. Because in truth, again, if we're basing it off of the idea that the cells on the human skin are the result of dead cells passing through the body and the end result of cellular action on the human body and part of the physiology of our body, then the belief then has to be that if we're even speaking right now, the only true version of the right now me you get is going to come from the essence. It's going to come from within. It's going to come from the soul. It's going to come from my spirit. So there's no way that I can present anything else to you at that moment, right? My physical form doesn't tell you the truth of who I am. And so many times I've had, conversations with people, and yes, and even when addressing, certain, cultures, and having people say, oh, you're so well spoken, you're so educated, and all these other things. And it's, it's almost as if saying, well, you were basing, you had an opinion of me beforehand because you based it off how I look. And then your opinion changed because you heard who I am. And again, that's when we start to see the deterioration of some of the lines of these propagated belief systems of racism and all these other things. And it's like, let's be clear, racism exists. We obviously understand, we know that. I think we all tend to have a misconception of what racism really is and the difference between racism, bigotry, and prejudice. But at the same time, we understand. But what I'm talking about even goes beyond that, because I truly believe that it is within us to all be able to reach a state with one another where we see beyond the physical form completely, where we communicate from one's true core self to the other person, and we're able to exceed the physical form. We're able to ascend the physical form while still being in the physical form. And even as we speak right now, the conversations that we'll have and the conversation that we're having, it allows us to do that in the first place. There is no emphasis on my physical form right now. All the emphasis is in vibrational energy and the harmonic tones, which comes from the words that I speak, which comes from and derives from an energy within. So again, like being able to see these things and starting to break down these walls and deteriorate these walls of how we view the physical form becomes one of the first greatest steps towards mastering the physical form. Because when so much emphasis is put on outward appearance without really truly being able to address like what creates that outward appearance, what gives life to that outward appearance, what really is truly the source of that outward appearance, and is that not outward, that outward appearance is not just the end result of something much more compelling, much more beautiful, and much more deeper that exists within you? I mean, isn't that not what we all are trying to truly achieve and aspire and see? And when I work with my clients, one of the things I always tell them is like, listen, like, challenge initiates greatness. You're going to have to go within. But if you're a warrior within here, you're a warrior out there. Doesn't matter what comes against you in life, doesn't matter what happens, doesn't matter who tries to do something to you, doesn't matter, who tries to devalue you, or who doesn't show you the love that you think you deserve, or any of those things, because you become so consistent with the application of wisdom, of learning, and taking the things that you learn and applying them on a regular basis, that now not only is your mind operating in that space at all times, and your spirit operating in that space, but now you've trained your body to operate in that space as well. I had a friend of mine, great friend, my boy Mbessa, the articulate, my brother. We were talking one day, he called me up and he said, he was kind of struggling with, the concept of this, like, how do we maintain the space of infinite possibility? And we kind of talked about this in the last one. Excuse me real quick, let me take a sip. But there's two places for which we exist within, and that is the space of infinite possibility, and it usually occurs right around the time when you have an idea. You get a concept to do something, and all of a sudden there's this like light bulb goes off, and you have a sense of elation and a feeling, and you get motivated. And that place that you're in, right in that space, is called the space of infinite possibility, right? But what most likely happens, and often happens for a lot of people, is that they end up going from that space of infinite possibility to the space of doubt and fear based on the programming that was already there. So say if they, you know, depending on how they were brought up, depending how their minds were nurtured at a young age, depending what kind of influences, what sphere of influences, and what kind of people around them, inspiring them in whatever shape or form, that was what gave the message that would come right upon the moment after they have that aha, that inspiration, they get that idea, right? And so that the moment from you go from having that feeling of infinite potential, like you have this feeling of like, I can really truly do something amazing here. Then all of a sudden you start to go down the checklist of all the doubt and fear. Oh, I can't do this because of this. I can't do that because of this. I can't do that because of this. And one of the things I found like a lot when I train people and I'm working with people, and I find that they come to a stumbling block. It's usually at the same place. It's where they say, I'm not losing any weight, but I you know, I can see a difference, but I'm not losing any weight. And that's because they don't understand the transference of weight and body mass index from fat to muscle. And so they think that there's no real progress because they don't really see it like that, because they don't see the weight coming off on the scale, but they see it in their face. They see it in their bodies. They see it, right? So again, the idea is that once you got into that place where you have that moment of that feeling of that intense sensation of infinite possibility that you can do almost anything you set your mind to, the idea is to try to continue to carry that. So when me and an investor were talking, he said, you know, I just don't get it. How do you stay in that place? And I said, it's not so much of a matter of you staying in that place. It's a matter of you understanding that that place always exists. That's the thing. Like, we all have an opportunity. And this again goes into the full understanding of the alchemy of self, because all of the components are there for your success and your greatness. All of the tools that you need to be the greatest version of you exist in every single instance of your life. And they are never, ever separate or gone from you. You can never do anything to lose the opportunity to make great change in your life. You can never do anything to take away from the ability that exists within you to be greater than you are right at this second. And in fact, if you take one breath right now and you believe within yourself that you can be much more, you will be much more by the end of that breath, simply because you had a different thought about it. And again, none of this means anything changes completely overnight. None of this means that we mysteriously, magically just changed our whole existence in one fell swoop. What it means is that we start to apply the knowledge and the wisdom that we have gained to everyday experiences and what we go through, so that we obtain more knowledge, more wisdom, more understanding. I was talking to a brother yesterday, and I said, I honestly just truly believe that all of this life really is this beautiful series of lessons to be learned to grow us as individuals. And that kind of, I'm going to segue now. If anybody has any questions whatsoever, please feel free, jump in at any time, ask me any questions that you have whatsoever. Again, we are talking about the alchemy of self, and this is the theory of the 16%. This is, you know, really a lesson more about understanding the physical form and understanding the ability to be able to exceed what you believe you have told yourself about your physical form and about who you are. And I saw somebody just say something about transformation, and I think it's a really, you know, an important word, right? And an understanding too, because I believe that, you know, as energy continues to travel throughout all of the sphere of existence, throughout all of the cosmos and everything in it, it's constantly transforming, right? And one of the things, I explained this to my daughter the other day, we were having this conversation. I'm blessed. I have a beautiful 12, about to be 13-year-old little girl who changed everything. Her mom and her are true symbols of love and light and inspiration. And I'm thankful I give thanks for them on a daily, and also for all other women like them in my life that have been inspirations in that regard. But we were talking the other day, and I was telling her about the death of a star. And this is always one that I when I'm working with my clients, there's a couple of these I go to because I think they're important to kind of understand. And I said, if you have a chance to look up a picture of a death of a star, it's one of the most beautiful things you'll ever see. And yet it's, the immensity of the energy and everything else. It's destructive nature and force is immense and incredible. But I said, but if you look at a picture of anything from a distance and it's something like that, it's going to look beautiful. But if you were up close and you were near it, it would obliterate you, it would wipe you out, and you would surely die, in the manner of speaking. But one of the things I told her, I said, but that's because that's how we perceive life as a whole. And we see life as a whole. We see things in that nature where we think in regards in terms of good and bad and negative and positive and all these other things. And so being close to a star in the human mind and it blowing up and wiping out all of the life around us would be bad to us because that's how we perceive the nature of life. But in truth, the real reality is that it is beautiful whether it's distant or far, and that it is also a part of the culmination of energy that creates and brings forth more life. So without it, you can't have more life. And just in the same, we forget and we don't look at the things that we go through and we view in this life in that same lens as being helpful and useful and beautiful and something that is inspiring and gives life to us, like all the bad experiences that we think we have in our lives, right? And the crazy part too is, and when you apply that to, and why is that important when we're applying that, I should say, why is that important when we're applying that to the theory of the 16% in the physical form? The reason why that's important is because through our experiences and through our circumstances, our body creates emotional triggers and responses. And that's really important to understand, because if ever you find yourself getting upset about something and it seems very specific to a very, a very an incident that reflects other things that have happened in your life. The reason is because it does. It reflects something that's happened before in your life, and your body has an emotional response output to the trigger. And so then these are the things that as we grow in our knowledge of self and we grow in our understanding of ourselves, we start to see that, okay, this is something that I actually have power over. I have control over. I can change the emotional output response that I get when I have these triggers. And in fact, I can even change the trigger itself to not be a trigger by understanding what it is. And again, why is that important? It's because like the other day, me and my daughter were driving along, some guy comes along, he tries to he cuts me off, almost hits us. And then, proceeds to try to do really dangerous and dumb things in his vehicle, and the whole time you could see this guy, him and whoever's companion was in the car, they're like, agitated, irritated, aggravated, angry, all of the A's, and then I'm just kind of sitting there and I'm smiling and really calm. And my daughter like looks at me and she's like, Dad, like, why are you so calm? And I was like, because kiddo, like none of this really affects me. Right. And the reason why that is because I learned a long time ago that when I even felt my heart rate accelerate a little bit, one of the things I focused on doing was releasing my jaw. Sounds crazy, right? But it's actually true. And the reason why is, one, because there's a couple of things behind that. Whenever you find yourself tensing up, you find yourself getting stressed out, you find yourself emotionally upset, or there's something that's off, examine your physical body in that moment and see what the response of your physical body is. Look for the things that you do. Do you clench your hands? Do you clench your teeth? Do you stick your tongue to the roof of your mouth? Do you bite your lips? There's all of these different things that we do physically that are indicators of emotional responses that have been created through things that happen in our lives that are, again, responses to these triggers. And again, the reason why that's important is because you're trying to master how to live within this physical form, how to exist within this physical form, and not just exist, but thrive within it. And in order to do that, there's a lot of things we have to kind of move. We have to remove emotional blocks. We have to remove these obstacles, these Jerichos, these things that kind of stand in the way of us being able to maximize and optimize the potential of this physical form. And also there's other things like diet and nutrition and supplements and time in nature. And I'll cover some of that too. I don't want to go too far in this evening. And again, if anybody has any questions, please feel free to jump in at any time. But I will cover also some nutrition, and I'm also going to cover some other things of health benefits as well. If anyone out there, if any of you guys suffer from depression, if any of you suffer from anxiety, if any of you suffer from any sleep apnea or any sleep disorders whatsoever, or anything really, I mean, there's a lot of stuff out there that in a holistic sense you can take that will help you with all of that. And like I said, I'll cover some of that stuff too towards the end of this teaching. But I do want to, to summarize, like, for the understanding of the 16% part, and also just to summarize, like, the truth of what our physical beings represent, and the beauty of it, and how through the hundreds of trillions of cells, and that's trillions, hundreds of trillions of cells and atoms and molecules and matter and all the things that it then forms, that creates this beautiful temple, this vessel that has this core energy, this spark of life, this inspiration to live, dwelling within it. And that also feels like at the same time it's in everything else, and it's not separate from anything. I was teaching one time, and I told this class that I was working with, I said, any of you go swimming? And they're like, yeah, of course. I said, okay. When you go swimming and you jump into a pool, do you feel separate from the water on the other side of the pool? And all of them were like, no. And I said, why is it that we feel that way when we're swimming? Why when we're immersed in like water or immersed in something, right, do we feel connected to everything? But the moment you step out of the pool, all of a sudden you don't feel connected to everything. I mean, there's no difference. The matter that touches my hand right now, the atmosphere, the CO2, everything that exists that's unseen with the naked eye is touching to my flesh, and then it's even going beyond that. And at the same time, like we were talking about earlier, that the skin is the result of the cellular movement going through the body, and that this is the last, the last of it right here, and then it sheds off and goes back into the atmosphere and back into the environment as well. Continual, perpetual motions. That's why we said ashes to ashes and dust to dust, but it's much more, isn't it? And so again, understanding and seeing ourselves in the light of what we truly are, knowing that we are not just physical beings, that we aren't just bones and muscles and blood and ventricles and veins and tendons and all these other things, but in fact, every single one of those things that I just mentioned has a universe of matter existing within it. That is you and me. And that also goes back to what we were talking about last time I taught, which is the language of life, and going back to the idea that, like, if you address yourself in words like lack, poor, broken, and all these other things, then you will absolutely be it. As a man thinketh, so shall he be. There is principle behind ancient scriptures around these things in regards to these things too. Like, these are universal teachings. As a man thinketh, so shall he be. What you think will become. So if you think in yourself in terms of lack, which we were taught to, if you think yourself in terms of poverty, which we were taught to, if you think yourself as sinful, which you were taught to, or broken, or all these other things, you're going to be bound to the programming that gets created from a limited form of thinking. That's the language of life. one way or the other. Now, the other part of that is then when we transfer that understanding to the human body and start to see our physical forms and our vessels as what they truly are, which is, again, living, breathing universes giving off energy at all points and at all times. From the very start of conception, they say that you can feel and hear the heartbeat within hours. There's literally a heartbeat from the point of conception. Energy, consistent in everything. You know, I was telling my daughter this the other day too, that even when you look up at the stars in the sky, I was like, the majority of what you're seeing are the light of things that have passed millions of years ago. But because of how energy works and how light travels and all of these other things, you're receiving information of things that have long since passed. Now, but again, it's still connected to us right here, right now, something millions of years ago. And again, then going back to the ocean. When you go and you swim in the ocean, you're connected to things that had long since passed. You're connected to life that had long since passed. You're connected to thousands of years of stored energy and information within the molecules of the ocean. And we don't even consider it. Because again, we don't see things as what they truly are. We don't give the real true consideration to what we truly are, which is much more. Way more than what we ever thought and we were ever taught. There's something beautiful within each of us, a universe of life that is teeming with all of life and is actually calling out to us. That's why we have this like innate sense within ourselves to try to do better, to try to do more, to try to do something to make it right. Because within us, there's a life that's calling out to us, and it's connected to everything. From every planet that's ever existed, every cosmos, every universe, to every breath of life anybody's ever taken, to anyone you've had the opportunity to have an experience with in this life, to anyone who's passed into the next. All connected, never separate, never broken, tethered to everything. And that's the beauty of this, is because once we get to that point of understanding, this doesn't hold the weight it once did. I remember I used to feel like my flesh weighed 1,000 pounds. Like just wearing this form, this suit wore down on me. And I used to hate seeing what I looked like in the mirror. I didn't like the image of my true self, but not because I didn't like the image of what my skin looked like. It's because I couldn't face what I looked like on the inside. So whatever I thought of the outside didn't matter, nor would anyone else. But once I started to uncover the truth about myself and realize the true essence of what I am and saw myself as I truly am, I started seeing a lot of beauty that I'd never seen before. And I started to understand more about my physical form too, how my muscles and my joints and tendons and, and how cellular growth happens and how to boost cognitive functions and how to improve my respiratory system and my circular system and how to improve my overall health and blood flow and my skin and all of these other things. But it all came because it became a desire for love and a desire for a greater sense of self that I then aspired to learn the things that I hadn't learned before. And then not only to learn them, but to apply them. And so I guess with that, I'll segue a little bit into now kind of the last two parts of, again, we're in the Alchemy of Self, and we're talking about the theory of the 16% and the human body. One of the things that we also kind of should talk about in regards of even understanding what that means to be human, understand that that's not one word, that's two words in one, and both signifying very specific things. Hue, which is of light, or color, which is of, of a different essence, right? Hues. And then you have man, which man didn't signify gender, man signified organic living tissue. So you add light essence for the essence of and organic tissue. So again, I'm talking about the organic tissue part now, right? So with that, I'm going to kind of segue a little bit into some of the other aspects of things that we can do to improve on our physical form and improve on our physical life. And the reason why we want to also, and it's not, I tell my clients this all the time. Listen, if you want to look a certain way, or if you're trying to fit into a dress, or you're trying to get sexy for the summertime or anything, and I'm not saying any of these things are bad or not reasons for you to do something, because any reason for you to do something is a good reason for you to do something if you're going to do it. I'm just saying that these reasons won't carry you beyond that, because those reasons are only limited to that. So when your reasons become that because I want a fuller life, because I want to feel more alive, because I want to have a greater opportunity to make an impact on other people's lives, because I want to be able to utilize everything within this physical form to giving back and to being love and light and to support others, and because I want to become greater than I even am right now, when that becomes the inspiration and the source, we can go way further with that than you telling me that you want to get sexy and be able to fit into a swimsuit. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. But it's just an understanding that I know that for me, my work exceeds today and tomorrow. And like I was telling you before, like when you're even looking at me or anyone who takes, any pride in caring for their physical form, what you're really seeing is not of them now, you're seeing what they invested in themselves before and what then became them now. And so even when I'm like, talking to my clients, and I'm telling them like, when you're addressing this, like there's two things you have to remember. One is have grace for wherever you are right now. Have grace. And that's not just in your physical form. I'm talking about your spiritual form and your mental form. Have grace for wherever you are right now. You are right here, and it took you whatever it took you to get right here, right now. And where we begin the work right here, right now, is to only look at what's right here, right now, not to look at everything that's gone on before, not to look at where you think you are physically or mentally or emotionally or any of that. It's to look at where you are right here, right now, and to work from there. And then it's to then start to apply the things that you have learned. The greatest progress comes when we take the lessons we have learned and apply them daily. That is the key of self-mastery. Self-mastery is the application of wisdom applied daily to your life, no matter what it is you've learned. Right? So when you get cut off by that guy in the car and everything, and your heart rate used to race, and you get mad and you want to go off and seek revenge or whatever else. Now you allow yourself to take the time to contemplate, to meditate, to bring yourself back to a peaceful state, so you control your atmosphere, you control your environment. So that person can go off and do whatever they're going to do, and they're not going to just have that experience with you. They'll probably have that with 10 more people before they get home. Whereas with you, that might be it, and you don't even remember it by the time you get home. And again, these are the application aspects. When we take what we've learned and we apply it to what we're doing. And so when we're talking about the physical form, right, nutrition is huge. Nutrition is one of the biggest things that you can do for your physical body to give it the fuel so that it can have the life that it needs and help you to live the life that you need. But nutrition and food are two different things. Eating and supplying your body with what it needs to be able to thrive are two different things. And especially here in American culture, because of the fact that a lot of how we view nutrition comes from a standpoint of eating much more than we should and a lot of the things that we shouldn't. And so, and I don't want to go too deep into this because I'd rather allow people the opportunity, if they want, either one, to ask questions right now, if you guys have any, because we're going to be moving into like probably the last 20 minutes or so of the teaching. And I would like to interact with anybody who's out there. And then two, because these are things that we could talk about. If anybody has any questions or wants to consult with me about these things, we can discuss it later. But I will go over some of the key points and like things that we should be doing with our physical form on a daily basis to allow us to feel more alive. Obviously, again, nutrition is one, but supplements. If you're somebody who suffers with depression, and this is where I do want to kind of review a couple of things to allow to get some information out there for people. Turmeric, whether in oil or whether in a pill form, if you're somebody who suffers from depression, if you're somebody who suffers from anxiety, if you're somebody who suffers from PTSD, turmeric is a huge one. The reason why a lot of the psychological disorders that people have is because of inflammation and because of a chemical imbalance, right? So things like turmeric are anti-inflammatories and are huge for helping people with, everything from, like I said, depression, anxiety, PTSD, and other things of that nature. So that's that's just one. There's a lot of others. I mean, I've suggested to people astragalus if you suffer from astragalus is good if you suffer from allergies. Maca for men over the age of 35, 40 years old, if you're, experiencing lower testosterone levels or energy levels and things of that nature, and your libido is suffering in regards towards it, maca is a great one to take as well. Another one for like respiratory, goji berries. If you're a person like myself who suffers from asthma, who has battled asthma, and as well as my daughter, eating goji berries every single day actually helps to reduce asthma, because it helps to reduce the inflammation in your lungs. And a lot of that, again, that's all triggers something that irritates your, and it's an allergic reaction within your body. But another, like on an opposite spectrum, right? The 2 hours in the sun and in nature. Being out in nature is huge. I at least do 4 to 5 hikes a week. At least go for at least 4 to 5 hikes, because it's so important for me, one, to be in nature, because it's one of the places that I feel like I get my greatest sense of reconnecting with all of nature and all of creation. And then two, because as a person with melanin in my skin, and as a person who responds well with being in the sunlight, my body feeds off of it. And also being in open air spaces, helps to create and to increase your lung capacity, which helps with blood circulation, because the better your lungs breathe, the better your lungs, produce oxygen. The more it's pumping blood, the more they pump blood, the more blood circulates. So, and on a vitamin point, if any of you have blood circulation problems, vitamin E is probably one of the best things you can take for blood circulation problems. But again, if anybody has any questions, whether right now or later on, regarding any supplements and diet, I would be more than happy to answer those questions as well. I do want to, let's see, we were going over supplements and diet. And again, yes, there's also exercise and everything that comes along with it. Well, the thing that I think is most important for people to understand is that, just like your DNA, just like your fingerprint, just like your tongue print, actually, and your retinal scans and all that, these are all individual, very individual to you. They're solely your identifier. They're the things that make you unique to you, and there is no one else like you. So diet, nutrition, and exercise and all these other things are going to be just as individual as those things are, because genetically speaking, no one person is exactly the same. And so, but yet we have a lot of, similar qualities in each person. So it's really about figuring out what works best for you too. But what I would say though is always know what your intention is. If you can set your intentions on something, you can know exactly what it is where you want to take it and where you envision it going. So know what your intentions are. If your intentions are to get healthy, know the reasons why. Have a reason why. And tell yourself that daily. This is exactly why I'm doing this. For me, it was very simple. I had lost too much of things that I loved and that I cherished. And because I had another life, and people that I needed to look after and care for. And it no longer was about me, and I no longer could be about me, and I no longer could be just selfish and believe it was all about me. And so I had to make the changes that appropriated the ability to be able to address these things in my life in a positive way and make a positive impact, so that I could take care of the people that I love the most. But that also began with taking care of myself. and loving myself the most. And again, it's not when we talk about being selfish and all of these other things, like being selfish is in terms of the things that we do to other people that impact them in a negative way. Being selfish, and taking care of myself and loving myself is not being selfish to anyone else, and it doesn't negatively impact anyone else. In fact, it has the capacity to be able to be a benefit to others because I understand how to love myself well enough to be able to love someone else and to be able to care for someone else. So that's just as much as important in that regard too. I don't know if anybody's out there. Anybody wants to throw some questions out real quick? We can make this last part interactive. If not, I hope that you have all had a chance to take in some of this and soak up some of this, and that it's been beneficial and of help to any of you. I definitely would say that as we all continue in this process, especially in this day and age, we are in the age of enlightenment. The knowledge of true self is becoming more and more readily available to those who are willing. You got to do the work, though. You got to put in the work daily to being able to continually progress, and even more so. Sorry about that. I was talking to somebody about this the other day, where I said, we think that, because we go through trials and tribulations, we go through hard times and we endure things in this physical form, that somehow means that we're being kept from something, that we're being, deprived of something, and that we weren't meant to achieve a greater sense of self. And we couldn't be further from the truth, because the reality is just like a tree grows even in the dark. It's like the tree is always striving for the light, even in the dark. So even in our darkest of hours, we're always going to continually keep on growing. And the object of our growth should be that we grow into the greatest form of self, no matter what that is. And it's not about being big and buff, and it's not about being super athletic, or it's not about, being the greatest orator, or the greatest artist, or this or that, or anything. The greatest version of yourself is the fullest version of love that comes to life within you. Again, the greatest version of self is this fullest version of life that comes alive within you. That love that comes alive within you. That is it. So what you do with your mind, what you do with your body, and everything else is a result of that. And that's kind of what we'll get into in the next teaching, the final teaching, which will be about the truth of your spirit, the truth of your essence, the truth of the core of you and who you are. And the reason why I did it in this way is because I wanted to be able to break this down in a way where people can understand how we can view ourselves, and how we can begin to make impacts right here and right now on our thinking, on the way we perceive life, on our relationships, on how we approach taking care of ourselves physically, and also on how we can live a fuller existence. Because that to me was one of the most important things about my process of self-mastery, was to be able to, one, learn how to love in a greater capacity, but also two, to be able to see life as it truly is, and love life with a fuller sense of life at all moments. And so right now, you know what? I just want to thank all of you who have taken the time to be able to tune in to this. This has been the Alchemy of Self Part 2. We were discussing the physiological and metaphysical aspects of the human temple, the physical body, the importance of understanding the balancing and of the whole of the self through diet, through nutrition, through exercise, and through prayer, meditation, and time and creation and nature. Again, if anybody has any additional questions, you can reach me either on Instagram at OGXIC Clothing. Again, that's at OGXIC Clothing. Or you can reach me on Facebook, Agüeybaná, and you're welcome, brother. Agüeybaná X Hatuey, and Yeah, and I'll be more than willing and happy to address anything, whether people are working through certain things in regards to their physical health or their challenges in their mental health and in relationships or other things of that nature. I often consult people. I do a lot of work within the juvenile halls, as well as I do work within probation departments, and have worked with, everything from 1.5 to 5-year-olds when I ran my school, to worked with at promise youth, all the way up to 17 and 18-year-olds. I've also worked with married couples and individuals who are seeking personal training. So anything whatsoever, you can contact me right there, ogxicclothing@gmail.com, or ogxic for Instagram. I hope that this has been a blessing to anyone who had an opportunity to spend this time with me. I send you all love and light, and I appreciate each and every one of you. Realize and know that you are much more than you have been told, and that you are beautiful in a universe, and that you have infinite potential. We are powerful, we are limitless, we are serene, we are eternal. Repeat that to yourself 10 times a day. Remind yourselves of your greatness. Continually strive to become more every single moment of every day. Utilize each breath of life to be able to live life truly. Become love. Become the greatest form of love that you were always meant to be. And realize that you are always it at all times. All right. Well, I don't have any questions. I guess that's it. Peace and blessings.